Welcome to our Ford Marketing Group. I'm Jack Holtz. Other members in our group are Esther, Sean, Basil, Casey, and Haley. I'm Jack Holtz and I did the history section. Ford Motor Company is an American automaker which has consecutively been within the top 5 largest automakers worldwide. Ford would go on to be one of the most profitable companies in the world and even to be one of the few to survive the 1930s Great Depression. Ford is a family-owned business and has stayed within the family ownership for over 100 years, and with its starting location and headquarters out of Michigan. Back in the early 1900s, Henry Ford, the man with the brains who started the Ford Motor Company, set out to build a simple, well-designed, reliable, and affordable vehicle that the average American worker could afford and handle themselves. Up until this point, automobiles, which were strictly for the rich, it had a complicated machine and it needed lots of maintenance, and it also needed a chauffeur who knew how the automobile worked and operated. It was Henry and his determined mindset that soon invented the Model T and the assembly line. Success came rapidly after those two inventions, and by the mid-1914s to 15s, there were over 500,000 Model T cars in the world. By 1923, the company Ford were producing more than half of America's automobiles. A couple years later, Ford had 20 different assembly plants worldwide, including Canada, Latin America, Europe, Asia, South Africa, and Australia. By this point, Ford had been the world's most familiar maker of automobiles, and by this time, World War II came about. The company was happy to help the war effort, and Ford was a major component of President Roosevelt's arsenal of democracy. Ford produced about 400,000 tanks and trucks, 27,000 engines, 270,000 Jeeps, and over 8,000 B-42 Liberators, which was a bomber back in World War II, and hundreds of thousands of gun mounts and machine tools. After the war, Henry turned the company over to his grandson, Henry Ford II. During the 1980s, Ford came out with the classic Thunderbird, Falcon, and Mustang. 10 years after this, Ford managed to pick up the company's Jaguar, Aston Martin, Hertz, Volvo, Land Rover, and Mazda. By the time 2008 and its economic decline hit, both Ford and GM took major losses. High U.S. healthcare costs, increasing gasoline prices, and eroding market shares were. It was here where Ford's new slogan, "The Way Forward," which also included resizing the company to match market realities and coming out with a newer line of inexpensive, fuel-efficient cars, came forward. Ford ended up closing 14 factories and cutting 13,000 jobs because of this. Ford also sold the company's Jaguar, Land Rover, and Aston Martin during this time. In December 2000, President Bush announced an emergency rescue plan to aid the top 3 motor companies, which at this point were Chrysler and Ford, to help prevent the collapse of the country's struggling auto industry. The president's plan was to give $13.4 billion of government loans to the Asset Relief Program. Chrysler and GM both ended up immediately taking the loans. However, Ford reportedly had enough money to avoid bankruptcy. Ford had experienced increased sales and market shares since 2009 and has reportedly been recovering greatly since the 2008 recession. As of 2017, Ford has over global revenue. Ford sold more than 7 million automobiles, employed over 130,000 people, and has approximately 90 plants and facilities worldwide. To this day, Ford's marketing plan to give the best reliable and affordable vehicle to the average consumer is still in effect. The company did take a dip with the presence of COVID-19 in 2020, however, and Ford luckily is nowhere near where they were back in 2008 with this hit. With the gaps that COVID has around 2020, Ford has made a goal to donate and disperse over 100 million masks by 2021. So far, Ford has made over 50,000 ventilators and is right on target with Max. Ford is on cutting edge production and is getting more electric vehicles on the road as the years come forward. Also adding and including plugins not only nationwide but worldwide.
So for Ford Motor Company, there are a few main external environmental forces that are acting upon Ford. The main one that I'd like to start with is the sociocultural attitude on climate change. So in a sociocultural sense, the majority of people right now across the globe they're beginning to value sustainability more than ever before. This value on sustainability and the view on climate change is even extending into the cars that people are buying right now. So this is why Ford Motor Company has been active and acted upon this environmental force by changing its marketing strategies to those that appeal to the green-minded consumers. Over just this last summer, actually, Ford updated their goals within their sustainability report to more proactive goals on how they're acting on climate change. Some of these goals included achieving carbon neutrality by 2050, achieving zero air emissions from their facilities, and by 2035, using 100% locally sourced renewable energy for all manufacturing plants globally. Aligned with that sociocultural attitude on climate change, legal and regulatory governmental bodies are also replicating that attitude on climate change. They're pledging and hoping to end their contribution to climate change. One of the ways they're doing this is by creating laws and regulations or orders to reduce emissions of the vehicles that operate within their nations or bodies, such as the state of California. They have even stricter regulations on vehicle emissions than the Environmental Protection Agency does on a federal level. So Ford, in response to this environmental force, has had to follow suit by only selling Ford cars that fit within the emission standards of California within California. Competitively, this environmental force there are many other car companies that are utilizing new technologies to create smarter cars. General Motors, a rival of the Ford Motor Company, is also in this race to release smarter cars and utilize this new technology. Ford, in response to this environmental force, has been trying to scale up their electrical vehicle lines, as was said before, expand electric vehicle charging stations, introduce self-driving vehicles, and more. To exemplify their use of smarter vehicles and the new technology, they've used the slogan, "Creating Tomorrow Together." This is the slogan that reveals how they are building the future as a team.
I'm Casey, and I did marketing objectives. Since the Ford Motor Company started in the early 1900s, they've strived to make the lives of every working American easier and less stressful while still progressing through each day. Ford's market is targeted towards those categorized between the lower middle class and the middle class and higher middle class, which is the reason why you see Fords all over the world, because they are not too expensive and low enough in price for the average American worker to buy. With more than 1.9 million employees and 68 plus plants worldwide, Ford utilizes these resources in designing and manufacturing, financing, and marketing their automobiles all throughout the world. By continuously producing and enhancing the technology that goes into their cars, trucks, SUVs, etc., they keep their market open to all consumers around the world looking for reliable source of transportation, whether it comes in the form of luxury or just your simple work car. Ford uses many different forms of distribution to get their products out to the average American worker, such as DSA, or direct selling agents, authorized dealerships, and service centers, which include services such as oil changes, tire rotation, and any other mechanical problems. And they got resellers and even includes e-commerce sites, which makes it easier for people who, especially during these times, can't exactly get out of the house and search online for the vehicle of their choice. There are many ways to be more personal with people. Ford aims to become the world's most trusted automotive producer by providing consumers vehicles and services to create a better world. Not only does Ford manufacture gas and diesel burning vehicles, but they've also, over the years, been researching and developing smart vehicles. Their plan is to continue focusing on the development of new powertrain systems and new fuel options in their vehicles. They also plan to pursue their goal of creating a brand new, high-value, self-driving vehicle business to lessen their carbon footprint. While doing this, Ford wants to manufacture the most trusted technology that will continue to deliver an ongoing source of revenue for them. With the sleek new 2021 all-electric Mustang Mach-E, they continue to show promise of a future with electric vehicles to continue their reach towards a more sustainable, zero-emissions future. Ford seems to be stepping in the right direction when it comes to making quality electric vehicles as well as their typical gas and diesel burning automobiles.
So the marketing mix, or the 4 Ps, as we're all very familiar with, for Ford. To start, the products and services that Ford offers, as we all know, they sell a wide variety of vehicles, but in addition, they also sell buses, parts for everything they make, and they have different financial options for the dealerships and for people trying to lease something like that. Ford breaks their income into 3 different sections on their income sheet. Automotive, which is their automotive section, Ford Credit, which is the dealerships and leasing, and then mobility, which is future research. In the first half of 2020, the automotive section had a revenue of $48 billion compared to the credit section, which had a revenue of just $6 billion, and mobility, which is more of a future investment and research, so therefore it only had a revenue of $23 million. Moving on to place, Ford, as was mentioned, was established in the United States and still has a very large presence in the United States, but they have also opened a wide variety of plants around the world. They have 8 plants in the United States, which is the most anywhere, and they have 7 plants in China, which is the second most. All of these plants in the second half of 2020, most likely due to the coronavirus pandemic, did not make any money. They actually lost money. But in the second quarter of 2019, the North American plants were the most profitable, having profits of $1.7 billion compared to Europe, which had a profit of $110 million, and China and South America, which actually experienced losses even in 2019 of 155 and 205 million respectively. Moving on to promotion and advertising, Ford has often relied on traditional advertising like TV and radio ads because they've existed for such a long time. As technology has advanced and the company has continued to make strides in the right direction, Ford has realized that they needed to increase their social media marketing presence, and therefore created Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube pages to try and attract more traffic to their websites, which, using a tool like Google Analytics, they realized was being successful. And Ford actually breaks down their websites into a wide variety of categories to make them a little bit more easily navigatable, and so that you can go to the website for your desired experience. Last but not least, price. Because Ford sells cars, their prices are normally rather expensive, which is why they try to make their cars seem tough and long-lasting. The 2 main market pricing strategies that Ford uses is a market-oriented pricing strategy, which basically means that the prices will change with fluctuations in the market. And Ford also employs a premium pricing strategy, which basically means that it can have a wide range of different priced products, from something that is very affordable to their high-class SUVs like the Lincolns, which are most expensive, considered to be luxury, and probably bring them in the most profit.
To start off with, a SWOT analysis is an organization's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The key to conquering weaknesses and threats within a company is to convert them into strengths. Ford has is their F-Series. Ford's F-Series has brought about major success for the company. To define this success further, Ford sold 896,764 F-Series trucks in the US in 2017. This put the F-Series as the best-selling vehicle in America during the year of 2017. This is not are also notable strengths of the company. This diversity ensures that every consumer is able to find the vehicle that is right for them. Looking at the company's weaknesses, Ford is extremely dependent on their market in the United States. With the use of international marketing, consumer loyalty can be gained around the world, converting this weakness into a strength. Secondly, Ford's amount of recalled products is known to be another weakness. While this is not fully avoidable, reducing the amount of recalls would benefit the company tremendously. Next, I would like to talk about the company's opportunities. With advanced, the two most notable being electric cars and 3D printing of parts. Ford's advancement into the world of electric cars would give the company a late mover advantage, allowing them to perfect their electric car model. In contrast, 3D printing of parts would give Ford a first mover advantage. 3D printing would decrease labor shortages and the amount of time needed to manufacture parts. Finally, we look towards Ford's threats, the most obvious being the competitive automotive industry. Many brands, along with Ford, are looking for the next big thing to push them ahead of the competition. Using the opportunities previously discussed will help Ford achieve this. In addition to this, the numerous regulations set in place for vehicle companies also creates a threat for Ford. However, Ford could find a way to use this to their advantage. For example, marketing the safety of a Ford vehicle is a major selling point for consumers. To summarize Ford's SWOT analysis, strengths include Ford's F-Series, brand image, and diversity in their product line. Weaknesses include Ford's dependency on the US market and product recalls. Opportunities include advancements in electric cars and the use of 3D printing. Lastly, threats include a strong presence of competition and the regulations set in place for vehicle manufacturers.
For our case study, we decided to do with General Motors. Some of the cars included are Buicks, Cadillacs, Chevrolets, and GMC vehicles. So both of these companies have nearly identical marketing strategies. They both have affordable and luxury models. They both have a very, very strong presence on social media platforms. They're both working on making a more environmentally friendly vehicle. They both have a financing branch, and they both make and sell parts for all of their vehicles. One of the big differences between GM and Ford is that GM has the OnStar feature, which is only available in GM vehicles. For a while, OnStar did make FMV, which was like an off-brand version of OnStar that it could be installed in other vehicles. They only made it for a few years, and there have been some third-party providers like Verizon. They made something similar that you could install in non-GM cars. This is something that Ford could possibly incorporate with making smarter cars and the use of smartphones with apps to have a similar feature that could be a selling point for Ford. GM is actually more popular in the United States than Ford is. GM has 17% of the market shares and Ford sits at 14.4%. But on the other side of that, Ford is more popular internationally. So Ford falls at third place in the international market with 5.8%, and GM doesn't place in the top 3. One of the reasons for this is GM actually has been pulling out of international markets. They completely exited India a couple of years ago. At the beginning of this year, they announced that they would be completely exiting Thailand for both production and sales, and they're trimming their presence in Australia and New Zealand. Part of the reason why they're doing this is to focus their resources and efforts on markets that are more profitable. And another thing that Ford could possibly glean from GM is looking at different markets that Ford is in and possibly trimming back some of the markets that they're in that are not doing as profitable as others.
Thanks for watching our presentation.